After all these years went by, I finally got around to watching Better Call Saul. Every single show that I've watched, I kept telling myself, okay, Better Call Saul is going to be the next show that I'm watching because I am a huge Breaking Bad fan. I think it is one of the greatest pieces of television of all time, and it will stand the test of history. I think Breaking Bad will forever be one of those great shows. So I always wanted to watch Better Call Saul, and I finally got around to it. We are going to talk about Better Call Saul today, just season 1, and this is going to be a spoiler discussion, guys. Spoilers are going to be talked about the entire way here, so there's a chance to click off if you haven't happened to click on this video and not read the title. So before we do though, I do want to say, guys, hello everybody and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I am your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's talk about Better Call Saul. So guys, like I said, man, I am a huge Breaking Bad fan and I've always been interested in watching the show. I just never got around to it. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's long. Maybe it's because I've been like really getting into anime lately. I don't know. Regardless, I'm so glad that I finally started watching this. When Better Call Saul aired, I watched like maybe 5-ish episodes with my mom when it first came out. And then I don't remember what came up, but we got busy and we just dropped the show. It's not that I didn't like it or anything, but I had a very vague memory of what was going on. So I'm pretty much watching this for the first time. The only thing that I really remembered was the skateboarders and Tuco. That's really what I remember, but I don't remember like what happened with all of that stuff. So guys, we're going to start off with the beginning of it. Let's just talk about the beginning. I'm going to talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, if there's anything there. So the show started with Saul or Jimmy, or he went by a different name. I can't remember what it was, but he wasn't Saul or Jimmy anymore. He was somebody new, and he actually ended up working and being a manager at a Cinnabon, just like he was going to tell Breaking Bad, or just like he was going to tell Walter in Breaking Bad that he was going to do. So that's a really cool touch, and that's something that I love what the writer of Breaking Bad does, or the writers. I don't know if it's multiple people. I think it might just be Vince Gilligan. I don't know. Regardless, but the show begins. He looks back on Better Call Saul, and it's like a history into Jimmy McGill. So Jimmy McGill, of course, he's a struggling lawyer, and with this first episode, and guys, I'm not going to lie to you, I hate pilot episodes. I just don't like having to build the story and getting in a new show. So at the very beginning of this, I found myself just a little bit bored, but that's just me not like being stubborn with a pilot episode. I don't know if anybody else feels that way or if it's just me. Regardless, okay, so we were pretty much getting to know all of the characters. We know Jimmy, he's a struggling lawyer. He's trying to get jobs. We're introduced to Mike, which is really nice, and I love the dynamic that they have with Mike here. Mike is just like introduces this grumpy old man, and I laughed so hard, honestly, when Saul was like outside, like, oh, you do want the tickets? Oh, you're like a troll under the bridge and don't have enough stickers, you know? It was just, I thought that was really funny myself. Like, so Mike was my favorite character probably in Breaking Bad. So it's just nice to see them all. So another thing that I will say is I have been spoiled, not of like the plot of the show, but I did know, unfortunately, that we were going to get more into Mike. We're going to get more into Gus. So I wasn't really surprised to see Mike there, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do. I don't know anything about the show, so thank God. And guys, while I'm here, please keep it spoiler free in the comment section down below, because I haven't started season 2 yet and I don't want it to get spoiled, and I love responding to comments. So please be respectful to me in that manner. So the season begins, and like I said, we're getting to know all the characters. Mike's there. We're introduced to Kim. We're introduced to Chuck. We're introduced to all of these different lawyers that Saul's working with. And the only thing in this entire season, to be honest with you, that I found myself not interested in one little bit was actually Chuck. I don't know why. And, well, I understand, like, that they were really building into something, and by the end of the season, obviously Chuck is such an important character to this story, right? And I understand why we had to spend so much time with him, but I was like, okay, he's taking care of this guy, lights are off, he's allergic to electricity. Like, I found myself on my phone, maybe, when I was watching those. Like, I don't know, I just wasn't interested in the Chuck stuff one little bit, but the rest of the show was incredible. I loved all of it, okay? It's just, like, specifically those Chuck parts, and I remember being disinterested in it the first viewing as well, like, because, again, I watched about 5 episodes with my mom when this first came out, so we're introduced to all the characters. That's pretty much the first episode, and then by the end of it, we are introduced to the Kettlemans. Well, we're not introduced to them. There's these Kettlemans who stole over $1 million, and we are introduced to those skateboarders. And this is the only thing that I really hard remembered about the show. So I was like, okay, Saul's gonna finally get into his, like, scheming times, because we know, like, at the show right now with Jimmy McGill, he's a good guy. He wants to be an honest lawyer. He wants to do good work, but now he's thinking about scamming people. So it's going to be interesting to see, and I don't know if this is where it's going to head, but I would really like to see the story. Well, it's got to head this way, right? Now that I'm thinking about it, the story with Jimmy falling more and more and more, and I don't want to say like a scumbag, but you know the kind of lawyer that he became, right? Better Call Saul. it's going to be like a development like Walter in that sense, where, because, and spoiler alert, at the end of the season, we saw I'm never going to make that decision again to do the right thing. So we can already see him flowing downhill a little bit. But so we have that whole scenario with the skateboarders. He gets hit and then he figures out it's a scam and he wants to do it to these people who robbed $1 million. So he's like, okay, so if we're going to sue somebody, let's get business off of the people who already are millionaires and they don't even deserve that money. Why not, right? With a very long story short of that, they end up doing the mission, but then the lady that they were trying to get drives away, and it turns out eventually not to be a kettleman at all, but these skateboarders follow them, and then Saul ends up following the skateboarders to the house. And this is what I remembered, and I remember this distinctively. Like, the first time viewing it, I was just like, oh, and my mom and I looked at each other and we're like, oh no, like, because the guys come in and then they have no idea who Tuco is. But as the viewer of Breaking Bad, right, we know that Tuco is like the worst person. He's like, he called him a word that I'm not even familiar with, but just in case it's a really bad word, I'm not going to repeat it. You know, they kept calling his mom something, and then Tuco was like, you called her, I'm just going to use stupid. You called her stupid. You called her stupid, and it was so uncharacteristic, right? Like, they're at the house, they're yelling at the mom, Tuco sends them upstairs, and before that, it's like, we know something's coming because Tuco is being so calm with them and kind of understanding, where it's like, oh, so there was a hit and run, eh? There was a hit and run, okay. Don't worry, grandma, or don't worry, mom, I'll send and go upstairs, don't worry. I will handle this, everything's okay, you have to trust me, I will handle this is all okay. And he's being like so nice, so respectful, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh no, like, what's gonna happen? He's gonna like cut him up or something, you know what I mean? Because we're sitting here, we know what Tuco is. I didn't expect in my first viewing to see Tuco there. That's the thing. I didn't expect them to have all these other characters there, and it just made it so much worse, right? When Saul comes up, and you know how they feel about the cops in that show. Open up in the name of the law. Open up in the name of the law. I'm here to, he didn't say I'm here to arrest you, but whatever he was saying, you know what I mean? He was like acting like he was a police officer, right? And then he just opens the door and Tuco's like this. Oh man, I was like, oh, so this is where that show's heading, eh? Maybe this is where Saul's gonna like get involved with all of them. I thought that was really, really well done. And actually something interesting I didn't know about this is I found out after this scene aired that the actor for Tuco doesn't like being in that headspace. He doesn't like playing Tuco. He doesn't like playing a guy like that. So the guy's a great actor, man. So I don't know how much we're really going to see of Tuco, because if the guy doesn't want to play Tuco, maybe that was like a one-time thing. Maybe it's just like a callback to the Breaking Bad fans, because it's tough to say at this point right now if Saul's going to really be involved with Tuco. Regardless, though, no matter what, I am very, very excited to see that. So, long story short, they end up coming out and dragging all of them out into the desert, and then the two skateboarders are trying to rat him out, and Tuco eventually figured out what they were doing, so Tuco was going to kill them all. But then Saul ends up convincing Tuco, and it's like, okay, you gotta be a fair judge. Tuco, you are a judge. You gotta be really fair. And it kind of reminded me in the way, like, sometimes Walt would talk to Jesse, you know what I mean? So you can see a little bit of similarities, and that's what I really, really loved. And to be honest with you, to be completely honest with you, I was on Tuco's side for all of that. As crazy as Tuco is, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, like, what Tuco does in general is okay, right? Like, I'm not saying that at all, but when he drags these guys out in the desert where he's like, you were disrespecting my family. You were trying to scam her of her money. You were trying to do this and that. You were calling her names. I'm going to cut their tongues out so they can't say that anymore. I thought that was a great punishment, to be honest with you. I thought they completely deserved it. Same with Saul. I thought they all deserved it. So I was on Tuco's side. And then Saul eventually whittled them down to hit them where they hurt, break their legs. And then they eventually got down to one leg each. And those guys were like, hey, you're the worst lawyer ever. And he's like, no, I'm the best lawyer ever. That's so true, dude. Like, to calm down Tuco like that. And he's just, Tuco, you need to be a fair judge. So it was really cool to see him like be able to calm Tuco down in that sense, because again, I was still on Tuco's side. I was like, skin them. I'm okay with that. I think they deserve that. And then they would definitely never do that again, especially if they're not alive, you know? But anyways, with Tuco, we are introduced to this character named Nacho. And then Nacho is somebody who gets a little bit more involved with Saul. Nacho, I don't know what to think about right now, because we saw obviously another side of him as the whole season went on, but he seemed kind of like a laid-back, chill, cool dude, you know what I mean? I don't remember if he said he was Tuco's cousin. I don't remember how he's related to, if he's friends or whatever, he's part of the family. I don't recall, but I didn't know what to think of him in the sense, because, again, he went over to Jimmy's house the next day, or the nail salon. And also, I like that how they have him living in the nail salon, just like the thing he wanted Jesse to buy all those years ago. Like, I thought that was really cool, the way they tied everything in together like that. So he comes in and he's like, okay, I went on and I won in this deal. How much money did they steal? And then, hey, he tries to convince Jimmy he's a bad guy. But then he was coming in. He was chilling back. Like, he was just like a laid back dude. He's like, oh, yeah, Tuco scared you pretty much, eh? You're like, you know, like Tuco, sometimes he can get like that. But me, I'm like, chill, man. I just want to work with you. I just want to like give you a little bit of a cut right now. And then he was like being all buddy with him. And I wasn't necessarily too sure what to think in the beginning. Again, like I said, but I was more on the side of, okay, I know this guy is probably capable, especially if they're working for the cartel, right? He's definitely capable of doing some bad things, but maybe he's just being nice to Jimmy. Maybe they need a lawyer. Maybe he just wants information to leave him alone. We don't know if he's that type of guy. So it's a little interesting to say. So Jimmy eventually was like, no, I don't want to rob him. I don't want to do the bad thing. I'm done with all this bad stuff. So then Nacho ended up leaving. But then before we move into the next part, we're finally introduced to the character who Slippin' Jimmy was. And to be honest with you, I don't have too much to say about it, although like Jimmy's life was kind of taken from him with a like revenge type prank. He took a crap in the car or something with kids there, and then he ended up being a SEX offender. So, but long story short, Slippin' Jimmy was a not so great guy. He was a scumbag. He was like making deals with people, ripping people off. And then that other character, the name's escaping me at the moment, his big fat fast best friend, you know what I mean? So, and that was all. We kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into Jimmy's past, and then there's little bits of that sprinkled throughout the entire time, right? But moving back into the main story, then we figure out that Nacho obviously wants to go steal the money from the Kettlemans, and then Jimmy wants to do the right thing because Jimmy at this point in the show is a good guy. He eventually rats on them, and that was a whole problem in itself. He was kind of giving a phone call, and then I thought something was going to come out that Saul, because at the end of the call, because I couldn't understand him, he was using the sex robot voice. He was like, at the end of it, he's like, oh, you're in danger, and it was his real voice. So I thought something was going to come out of that. Like, they're going to figure out that Saul called, and then they'd be like, okay, why is it Jimmy's voice on there? How do you know that this warning is going to take place? I thought something was going to come out of that, but it didn't end up being that way at all. But long story short, they had the whole setup there. And eventually Nacho got caught, and Jimmy ended up needing to prove his innocence because Nacho said that Jimmy ratted on him, which he did, but at the same time, he's kind of the one who got himself caught, and then that whole thing comes around with the Kettlemans and the kidnapping. He needs to prove that Nacho didn't necessarily kidnap them, with Nacho having stuff like blood in his van. So this is the point where we finally see Mike's character start to develop a little bit, and then he was the one who opened up about being a police officer a long time ago, and he was like, we've seen this type of thing happen before. They kidnapped themselves, and they went into the house and found out the doll was missing. So Jimmy went up and tried to find him himself, because he only had one day, I believe, to figure it all out, because he knew that Nacho definitely didn't do it, and they're hiding somewhere, but they're somewhere close to home. People don't want to leave home. Mike was a big help with that. So Jimmy found out in their backyard there was a very long walk into a forest, and they were in a tent, and they found them, and it was funny because he's like, here's Johnny, you know. And then they started freaking out a little bit. Jimmy tries to take the money. He takes a bribe, and then that entire case turns into an absolute disaster, because that springs into it being Kim's case, and I think it was HHM or HMM. I don't remember which one it is. The law office people were fighting over about the Kettleman's case because they found them. Nacho was innocent, so Jimmy was in the problem where Nacho still thinks that he ratted, and Nacho was probably going to come for him. So we don't know what's going to happen with that right now, but we know that Nacho got off. Jimmy found them. The Kettlemans are in a huge problem right now, and that kind of like spiraled into its own thing where Jimmy ended up wanting to just make his own business and leaving HHM. And I think this show's probably going to end with Jimmy having the Better Call Saul studio, but I don't know. Maybe we'll have like a whole season on that. I don't know. I'm very interested in like where this is going to go, because it's already starting with Jimmy wanting to have his own thing. But then with Jimmy wanting to have his own thing, we have that episode where he had that whole scam with the billboard sign where he tried to make his own thing. People were taking it down, and then he put up obviously the thing in the back where he was like, wow, I'm just a lawyer. I'm the working hard American man. And then they ended up pushing that whole stunt. And I was kind of onto that, to be honest with you, where it's like, okay, they were faking that Slippin' Jimmy tactics right there, eh? So that was a whole good scenario. Jimmy ended up being a superstar. He's finally getting into his own business. He's finally getting into elder law. So Jimmy is a little bit happy, and he delivers this news to Chuck. And that's where we finally get an episode dedicated to Chuck. And even then, like I said at the beginning of the show, I was like, oh my God, I'm so not interested in anything about Chuck. So to be honest with you, when this whole thing first started, I was a little bit confused on him having an allergic reaction to electricity. I didn't know if it's real. I still don't know if it's real. And even with that episode, the doctor was saying it was all in his head and it wasn't a real disease, but then he was like freaking out and they were having episodes. Apparently, we're supposed to know, and I don't remember how I figured this out or if somebody told me, one of my friends that watched the show, that they told me that we're supposed to know at this point that it is all in Chuck's head, because there are points where he's not really thinking and he ends up outside. And there was a whole another episode about that where Jimmy just finds him outside. There was just something on his mind. He just walked outside like it was nothing. He's like, I'm outside. So he was all good. So I am almost sure that the disease is all in his head, but I didn't really figure that out for myself. I found that out from an outside source. I just don't recall exactly what it was that told me that. So that whole thing was really confusing to me. And again, to be honest with you, I just didn't find it interesting. I wasn't interested in Chuck one little bit until the end of the series. So Jimmy and Chuck ended up together. Jimmy was diving into elder law. We had all those episodes with him and the old ladies. Everything was like looking very, very nice. But within that same time period, we finally get to open up about Mike. We finally get to dive into Mike's backstory. That actor, the guy who plays Mike, is probably one of the greatest actors in television. The way this dude can carry himself and then bring raw emotion out of you is amazing. Like the few times that he yells, the tough guy persona, him going to cry, he really got me with his story. And when I was watching Breaking Bad, it really hit home when he told that story about taking a half measure to Walter. Like, I was engaged. Like, the way that guy performs, the way that guy sits down and tells a story, the way he communicates, it really captivates me, man. That guy is so good at what he does. Big fan of his, and Mike is my favorite character. And it's probably going to be my favorite character in Better Call Saul. He is so far. So we saw a different side to Mike. There was kind of a whole episode dedicated to him. We found out that he lost his son. We found out the whole story with Maddie, and then it was kind of Mike's fault that he got murdered. You know, he led him down the wrong path, and then his wife was thinking that Matt was dirty. So there was that whole thing about he's like, oh, I was having a conversation with my son. It was just really, really tearing at the heartstrings. We got the whole backstory with that, and it was so nice to see Mike for the first time getting to babysit Kaylee. And this is where I was thinking, because I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, because I think the whole episode was about Mike in that story. I started thinking about how much harder it hit when he was on the phone. The first time that he was asked to babysit Kaylee, he was talking about how he wants to do nothing but be there for his family now. He picked up the phone and was like, whatever you need, I am there for the family. Whatever you need, I will take care of her. And that just made it hit so much harder, knowing what happens in the end of Breaking Bad, where Mike leaves Kaylee at a park, Walt shoots him, and he dies. That just brings a whole new meaning to that. And I've heard that this show does that a lot throughout the series, so I cannot wait to see what else we get into. But man, that was tugging at the heartstrings. But then going back to what I was saying, when he sat down and told the whole story about the two cops, about his son, about everything, that was fantastic. I loved opening up about Mike. I loved getting to know the character. I loved seeing his emotional side. I loved seeing how Mike was like drinking himself to death. You know, it just opened up so much new variety about the character. And again, I cannot give enough props to that actor. He is incredible at what he does. Absolutely incredible. So moving on from that, we end up getting a little bit more into both Chuck being exposed to the light and trying to just, okay, I'm building a tolerance to it. And maybe it is all in his head. And we're getting hints towards that. And then we also have that with the Kettleman's lawsuit. That whole problem with Jimmy kind of came to a close because he had Mike end up stealing the money from the Kettlemans. The Kettlemans freaked out, and man, they were good actors too, those little weasels. You know, like every time they were on screen and they were just talking like, you're the only kind of lawyer that guilty people hire, you know, like it's just like both of them when they were on screen, like that little CUCK and that girl, she was horrible, man. Like I wanted to hit them every single time they were on screen. So that whole thing kind of came to a close, but not really. We don't know where that whole situation is going to head towards, but they still have that entire part of the episode, and this is kind of where the season closes off, where Chuck and Jimmy start working on this case because Jimmy finds the Sandpiper, or it wasn't Sandpaper, it was Sandpiper, I think. Sandpiper, the elderly home, whatever it is, found out that he was stealing money. He was looking into it. Him and Chuck start working together, or at least we think that him and Chuck are working together. And this is the first time I was like, okay, this is where it's good. This is why we're learning so much about Chuck. We need him to get back in the law business. He has something to do with the company, you know. Okay, maybe I can get invested in a little bit in Chuck right now, but then to be honest with you, while this was all going on, we of course had that whole clip where Chuck was making phone calls behind Jimmy's back. I'm not going to lie to you, and maybe this is stupid on my part. I wasn't thinking anything of it. I was like, who's he calling? And then I didn't second guess it. I don't know why. I think that's very dumb in my eyes, but it all made sense because Chuck ended up trying to convince Jimmy to hand it over to HMM, the lawyer company, or I can't remember if it's HHM or HMM, whatever it is. You'll have to excuse me. My apologies, guys. It's a little bit difficult to remember every single little detail about this show, but Jimmy didn't want to because of a multi-million-dollar case. He ends up agreeing. He ends up going to him, and then they present the case, and they won't hire Jimmy. They won't hire Jimmy, and Jimmy kind of freaks out and wants to know why. And again, this is where Bob Odenkirk, his acting skills come out too. I feel like everybody gets like their own chance to shine in a different way because you never see Saul being a character who's like angry, yelling. He's like, I want to know why you won't hire me, you know? And it was very pulling at the heartstrings. And it's like, they don't like you, obviously. But then we come to find out after that it was all because of Chuck. Chuck betrayed his own brother. Chuck was the reason. And then I was sitting here, I was like, okay, that's why it all makes sense. We got all this story about Chuck. We got all this backstory about Slip and Jimmy because Chuck didn't want to work with him, and Jimmy found out because of those phone calls that were deleted. He went out in the night perfectly fine. You know, he went out with the electricity perfectly fine. And then the lawyers at the place actually ended up liking him, but they had to bend over to Chuck's will. And I was like, oh my God, Jimmy's own brother. This guy who you were taking care of for the better part of a year, the only guy who cared for you, the guy who fed you, the guy who brought you everything that you needed. And you're going to turn around on him like that. And just because he's selfish, yeah, things get easier. So it doesn't matter where he got his law degree. Hire your brother. It is crazy to me. And I'm all the type of person who I'm like, people don't change. Just like Chuck said on the show, to be honest with you. People don't change. People don't deserve second chances. I'm kind of like that in the sense of like if it comes to somebody being where like scamming people the way Slip and Jimmy was. But I would make that exception for my brother who's been taking care of me. If I had a fake disease for all of these years and my brother was bending over to every little whim, he was trying to, it's just different because it's not like giving a second chance to somebody who's a stranger. You still don't know their alternative motives. This is somebody you grew up with. This is your brother. You know if they're capable of change. And Jimmy proved that he's capable of change. And he spent the whole season wanting to be a good guy, doing the honorable thing, helping the old people. And of course, like there were selfish motives through that, but still, he was just trying to be a good lawyer and doing the right thing. And he obviously turned his life around from being Slip and Jimmy. But then he was just selfish, Chuck. He turned on his own brother. And that is like, I will never understand people who do that. That is crazy to me. It's different if like your brother goes out and tries to kill somebody. You know what I mean? It's different if you have like things happen where you legitimately have families get separated. There are bad people born into certain families. You know what I mean? Exceptions are here. But for those people who just, I can't imagine turning on the brother. It's like what you see on TikTok right now, or like what's going on in the whole Logan and Jake Paul. That is taking over the internet at the time of I'm recording this video. And I look at that stuff and I'm like, that is your brother. That is your brother. My brother is my best friend. Nothing will separate me from my brother. I will always protect him. I will always want the best for him. My brother recently got a job where he makes more money than me. I'm happy for him. That's all that you should be for your brother. I will never understand that. So that type of stuff, especially since we're seeing it in society more and more today, people are caring less about family. That hits hard to me. My parents instilled me with the correct values to take care of my brother and to value my brother. So for Chuck to turn in Jimmy like that like pulls on my heart. That stuff pulls on my heart. And then Jimmy was understandably so upset. And I wouldn't even know what to think. He was like, he took off. He's like, I'm not taking care of Chuck anymore. But he still has the heart to have somebody else make sure. And he's checking up on them, driving up the road, making sure that Chuck is getting all the right supplies. And he's correcting them too. Chuck might have been correcting him. But still, Jimmy is doing everything in his power to make sure Chuck is still taken care of after everything that he did for him. Chuck was selfish. Chuck ended up being the villain of this whole thing. Tuco was more logical there, where he's like, oh, you just got your degree from whatever. I had to work to be a lawyer. I don't even want to hire you. And then it makes all this sense where in these flashbacks, Chuck never really seemed happy for him. I thought Chuck was just a little bit of a weird guy, but all that came to a close. Chuck doesn't like Jimmy. Chuck, oh my God, like that is unbelievable to me. That is such an unbelievable betrayal. Craziness. That is absolutely crazy. Other than that, though, the series kind of ended with that whole little Mike and Nacho deal where there was that nerdy dude who was wanting to sell some drugs, and then Nacho ended up coming there. And you kind of saw a difference in Nacho's eyes where he's capable of something bad, and he's a little bit more tied into the cartel than we might have thought. I don't know how obvious it was at the beginning, but other than that, the series kind of just ended with Jimmy really upset about Chuck. He was freaking out a little bit at the end of the episode, and then at the end, he has a conversation with Mike. He was like, of course I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, why didn't we take that money from the Kettlemans when we had the opportunity to? And Mike's like, you want to do the right thing. And then Jimmy said, I will never make that mistake again. So I'm wondering, because I believe we have 6 seasons of this, when Jimmy is going to start going downhill. Sure seems like it's right now. But man, this started off as such a great show. And knowing Breaking Bad, knowing those writers, it's just going to get worse. It's going to get better. And I know from what I've seen online that we're going to get introduced to Gus. So maybe who knows what's going to happen to get tied in through all this. But man, what a fantastic show. I am looking forward to it. Guys, if you've made it so far in this video, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening to me. If you don't mind, please don't spoil season 2 or anything else down below. I work so hard to stay away from spoilers, man. I'm upset that I even know that Gus is coming back, okay? So guys, let me know what you thought. Comment down below specifically about season 1 of Better Call Saul. I would love to know what you think down below. And thank you so much for watching this video. If you are new here and you enjoy the content, please consider hitting the like button. It would help out the channel a ton. And subscribe if you are brand new. If you'd like to continue watching the Clenema channel, there'll be 2 videos on screen for you right now. Something that I watched and I talk about just like I do in this video. I will see you either there or in the next video, guys. Take care.